Welcome to the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast. And today, for this episode, we have Orla back. Welcome back, Orla.
Hi.
Oh, I'm hoping that life has thrown at you many questions on horse nutrition that we can cover today.
Many. A bit too many, but we'll try and stay on track.
Actually, I must take note of the time so that we can finish at some sort
It is 2:06.
some sort of reasonable time. Rightio, well, how about without further ado, we jump into some questions.
Well, I listened to your Ciaron Maher episode.
Ah, yes.
Oh my God. It actually, I think I not take you for granted. I forget what people think of you and how much they just think you're just, someone that you can't reach. And I'm just like, I take it for granted. I'm like, hey, Nerida, I got a question. So I wanted to kind of put it out there that I'm so proud of what you and the Ciaron Maher team have done about talking about it, because it's so taboo to talk about racing diets, the negatives of racing. Like, no one wants to talk about that. So yes, it made me very proud to be like, everyone listened to this episode.
Oh, thanks, Orla.
And I've sent it to everyone I know. So we've had a couple of questions back on that.
Awesome.
So it's going to be a bit of a thoroughbred question. Sorry to non-thoroughbred people.
No, well, I mean, there's so much to learn, and truly, like the Ciaron Maher Racing team have just been so good to work with, and it's been such a fun project because we've been able to see the positive changes over time, and we've been able to see it, in the horses themselves, but also like in really hardcore data that we have as well. There's a paper that is in the link in the show notes, the link to the paper on the microbiome work that we did with some of those horses and looking at the shift in the microbes as we change their diets and stuff. It's just so it's blown my mind, a lot of that work, and to see them embrace the science of feeding and reap the rewards of it has just been so wonderful.
Yeah, just watching it from the background, knowing what that they were making changes, but not really ever asking you about it or talking to anyone about it, and then just seeing it all come to life, I was like, oh, I'm so proud.
Yeah, and it's so brilliant too. Like whenever I ask them, can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? They're so happy to share the information, and that just makes all the difference. And I really hope, like, the Australian thoroughbred industry, it is so stuck in the dark ages in terms of nutrition. And it'll be the trainers who are willing to step outside of what they see and what they know that will ultimately reap the rewards. And they take a little while to come. And it's not, they're not easy changes sometimes, but they're definitely worth it. Especially from the horse's perspective, they're definitely worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I sent it to one of my friends who's northern New South Wales, and she remembers me coming in and talking to her, and she was like, yeah, talking. We're not changing our diet. And she just said, she was like, it's funny how it takes someone credible to actually change my thoughts. And it was a real at all the thoroughbred trainers who never listen to you. So screw you guys. But she has some questions. We have a few. Well, the first question that they want to know is, do we get to have any idea of what he's feeding?
Yeah, I mean, it's on Facebook and Instagram, and
but the ingredients aren't.
Well, the feed ingredients are. I mean, in the feeds that they're feeding. So, I mean, the thing is, and it's interesting because I've had a few trainers contact me saying, I hear you're doing the nutrition for Ciaron Maher Racing, and what do you think about, changing to this feed or that feed? And I say to them, look, the reality is you could change to that pellet, but if you're still feeding it in the way that tradition says you feed in the thoroughbred industry, feeding it that sort of well over 5 kilos of grain a day and not nearly enough hay, you're not going to see the benefits. It's not about the products. It's sort of about the products. It's more about, how are the products digestible, and, do they have a good base of vitamins and minerals? But so much of it is around making sure that they've got enough fibre in their gut to allow the hindgut to do what it needs to do. I described the hindgut as a rechargeable but always fully charged battery. Now, if you skimp on hay, your battery's about 30%. and they run out, and you can see it in racehorses where they just hit the wall, and they run out of muscle glycogen because they've been relying on it so heavily because they're not getting that energy flowing constantly out of their hindgut. You would have laughed at me if you heard me watching St George race. So he raced in the race before the Melbourne Cup, and came a very, very close second. And it was just so beautiful watching him, knowing the story and knowing where he's come from, and watching him he's so happy and was just trying so hard. Where was I going with that? Oh, knowing, that's what I said. You would have laughed at me going, come on, St George, like you and your hindgut, like you've got everything you need to get there, just get there. But knowing that those horses will not have been drawing down on their muscle glycogen supplies because they've got a hindgut that is full of fibre, it's pumping energy out into their muscles and making sure that they've still got glycogen. So it's not, I mean, yes, it is a little bit about what they feed. It's mostly about how they feed it, when they feed it, how much. So, in that podcast, we talked about horses that were less than 500 kilos, but getting fed more than 5 dippers of grain had significantly poorer race results than the horses that were heavier than 500 kilos and getting the 5 dippers of grain, when your grain is matched to their body weight sort of thing. So more grain just doesn't do them any favours, and yet that's how a vast majority of the industry feed.
Yeah, there was one trainer in particular who's not involved. They're closely, they train together, I won't say. And yeah, I convinced him to change from a raw grain diet onto an extruded diet, and I begged him, you have to feed more hay. He fed a dipper, or he fed a biscuit in the morning, biscuit in the afternoon, or whatever like that. And then he whinged to everyone who would listen, and he whinged to one of the girls we worked with, oh, the diet was terrible, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So they changed the feed, fed less, fed no hay.
But
and they're like, the horse is starving. And I'm like, of course it is.
Yeah.
It's like, they're like, oh, but we fed it 5 kilos in the morning and 5 kilos at night, and it always had food left over. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
Jesus.
And that's the slump too, after when you change to feed the way that they're feeding with, there was always a lot of hay in the Ciaron Maher Racing diet, which was wonderful. So with them, it was more reducing the grain and making the grain more digestible, so not so much starch ended up into the hindgut, and then the horses can fully utilise the fibre out of the hay. But it is a big problem. Like, either trainers will reduce the amount of grain but not feed them more hay, so they're not filling in the energy gap, or they don't give them enough time for their hindgut to re-establish fibre fermentation capacity, because any trainer who is feeding any amount of cracked corn will have pretty much wiped their horse's fibre fermentation capacity. So if you take that out of the diet and change to feeding in a way that is a lot more friendly to the horse's gut and a lot more better in terms of supporting a lot more better.
Hello, betterer.
He's betterer. I'm just trying to get my point across, obviously, but so much better than I can't even remember what I was saying now, but getting the gut back to functioning the way a horse's gut should function, so much better for performance. But you have to sit out that slump, and that's where most trainers don't have the nerve. They'll do it for a couple of weeks, go, no, this is terrible, it's not working, the horses don't have enough energy, but they haven't let them readapt to that diet. And it was really interesting. I mentioned really briefly to you off air, but we just today got the microbiome results for Alay, the off-the-track thoroughbred that we've had here for nearly 12 months now. And I've just been tracking her microbiome. So we did one on day one when she first came to us, and then one after a month, one at 5 or 6 months, and then one at around 11 months. And it's really fascinating seeing, like, there's changes that, on first look at it, myself and Belinda and Michelle, two really experienced microbiologists, can't explain some of the changes. Other changes, you can see that over that amount of time, the populations of specific bacteria are either consistently decreasing or consistently increasing. I'm like, wow, isn't that amazing? Like, that's 12 months.
That's cool.
And it's still shifting itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it takes, they adapt They adapt reasonably quickly. So, you don't have to wait 12 months for a racehorse to turn around off a really high grain or poorly digestible diet. But you have to be aware that you're working with a biological system that takes time to readapt itself.
It'll be interesting to see how long it takes for that to just kind of balance out.
Yeah, I said that to Belinda today. I said it would be fascinating to take a sample from her, say, at the height of summer for us this year, so that there's not, because you can see the effect of the ryegrass pasture on it and the really fermentable fructans in the ryegrass pasture in the spring. But yes, taking it, at 18 months and then at 2 years, and also testing the rest of my herd to see how different she is. I mean, this is really nerding out on microbes, but yeah, it's just
so interesting though.
All these things of, how much of what we see in their gut is the environment that they're in, and how much is them. Like, how much can we actually shift their gut? Because, they're like 7 horses here all in the same environment. It'd be really fascinating to see how similar or different they are.
Next study.
Watch this space. Yes, I think we will do it.
And before I forget my train of thought, just remind me again where people can get their microbiome tested.
Quantal Biosciences. But if you go to equigi.com, I think is the website. But yeah, if you search Quantal and equigi, you'll find there. And they've actually just got a new kit that means they can ship certainly from anywhere in Australia, and I think soon maybe they will be able to do international samples as well. But it's a cool little kit that you put the manure in a fluid solution, and then you just take drops of it with the equipment that you are given. It's all sent in a kit, and puts them onto a card, and it dries off, and that's all you have to send in now. It's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. Okay. So talking on the slump then, would it be something like if you had a horse spelling and you're going to be bringing it back, or you've had a horse change from one trainer to the other, like what is that time period where you're going to see that slump and recover from that slump? And if starting them on an extruded feed being the main change from raw to extruded and a higher fiber diet, is that going to help the horse start on a better note when they come back into training? Does that make sense?
If they're on that feed when they're out spelling.
So when they were spelling, before they were spelling, they were on a raw grain diet.
Yeah.
Then they've gone to spell, and they're getting fed probably nothing.
Or heaps.
Yes. But getting them onto like a bit of a feeding regime that's going to be similar to what they're going to be fed coming into training. So like, I guess a pre-training diet.
Yeah, I mean, as long as where you get the slump is where something has wiped out the fiber fermenting microbes in the hindgut, because the slump is largely that they're not getting. So on a grazing horse or a horse that's living mostly on hay, 80+% of their daily energy requirements come out of the hindgut as volatile fatty acids. Like it is their natural source of energy. It's what their whole system is wired up to thrive on. But when you've got horses that have been, say, on any amount of cracked corn in their diet, that dumps so much starch into their hindgut, and the starch-loving bacteria ferment it really quickly, produce a heap of acids, and then they shut down or kill off the fiber-fermenting microbes. So the slump is that there's not very many fiber-fermenting microbes in the hindgut. And when you change away from giving the horse large amounts of grain or any amount really of indigestible grain, those horses under those situations are getting a lot of VFA out of the hindgut, but it is from the starch fermentation. So all of a sudden we take that starch out of the hindgut because we've reduced the amount of grain and we've improved the digestibility of it. So it's not ending up in the hindgut anymore. And then we're asking them to extract a lot more energy in their diet out of the fibres and forages that they're being fed. But in the immediate period, they don't have the bacteria and probably also don't have the fungi to do that fermentation of the fibre in the hindgut. So while they're building up the workforce to ferment the fibres again, they have this energy slump because they're not able to actually extract very much energy out of their forages. So so if you bring them in off spelling, I mean, in theory, if they've been spelling, especially if they've been spelling largely on just pasture and hay and small amounts of feed, they should have done a fair bit of that rehab of their hindgut essentially while they're out spelling. And then if you bring them back in onto a digestible grain diet, lots of hay, you shouldn't actually see a slump. But you will see it anytime you take horses off high grain diets or indigestible grain diets and put them onto a lower grain diet with more forage, because you're shifting where they're getting the energy from in their diet, but they don't actually have the means of extracting that energy yet. But the only way to get them that means is to leave them on that diet. So there's really no way around it. You just have to go through it.
So how many weeks are we putting this horse at the spell, or are we sticking through the
No, I mean,
slump?
it depends how much damage has been done. For a horse that is on I've seen some, makes my toes curl, but I've seen some racehorse diets like 13 kilos of grain a day. And in amongst that is kilos of cracked corn. Like that, the horse's guts on those diets are just absolutely obliterated. So for them, I'm going to say, and this is not based on anything other than what I know of hindgut microbes and having watched many horses over the years, but I would say for any horses coming out of those situations, it's going to take a spell on a predominantly forage-based diet to let them build up those microbe numbers, and they probably need to be out with horses that have got healthy fungi in their guts to try and help them repopulate from the environment a bit. For horses, so the Ciaron Maher Racing horses, their diet was okay. I mean, they weren't feeding obscene amounts of grain, and the grain had been cooked to some extent. It just wasn't super digestible. It was a little bit more digestible than raw grain, but not heaps more. And so for them, a lot of those horses could stay in training, and it was weeks to maybe a month that there was a slump, and then they were kind of back up and running again. And it wasn't the same horses, but we did the microbiome analysis not that long after they went onto their new diet, and you could definitely see the change in the microbes. There's more fibre fermenters, less lactic acid bacteria.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Okay, and then I remember we had a spelling farm in, I don't know, Wyong area, Central Coast. And they always had issues when they had horses specifically coming from, it was Randwick stables. And when they go out to spell, they would lose weight initially. There's two things. One thing we discovered is that all the stables that they were coming from had equine lights.
I remember that.
Do you remember this one?
Yeah.
So they had these amazing coats through winter, and they were, in spring brain, and then chucked out the paddock, and they would lose a massive amount of weight. Which more bringing up, because I just don't think people ever think about it, is that you're taking a horse from a very warm environment, lovely rug, beautiful coat, thinking it's in spring, chucking it out to 10 degrees, taking it from a high grain diet and putting it onto grass, and then going, oh, my horse is sick. And just know, actually, you've got no fiber fermenters in your gut to adjust to all that lovely grass they're eating.
Yeah. So there's definitely that if they're going out, and this is where, for some spelling places, they keep them on so much grain because that's the only way they can keep weight on them. But then the horse doesn't actually get to rehab its gut in any way. But you should see if a horse has got a healthy gut and they go out onto a good diet, like a heavily forage-based diet, they might just stagnate for a little while, and their coat, particularly if they've had an equilume on. I don't think we see that very much anymore.
But I hope not. I hated that.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the purpose of them in broodmares. So if anyone doesn't know haven't seen an equilume, it was a halter, and it shines a particular wavelength of blue light, I think. Yep. Don't quote me on that, into their eyes, and it changes it turns on and off at certain times, but it changes the day length, because the horses broodmares or all mares will cycle with increasing day length. So they're a clever contraption. They're brilliant for breeding when you're trying to get broodmares to cycle early. But that particular stable had used them on the racehorses just for the purpose of having a nice coat, and then they were coming out into spelling and essentially having this rapid change of season, because it wasn't the season the horses thought it was. And had also, I would imagine, I don't know what the diet was they were being fed when they were in their racing stable, but coming out onto a largely forage-based diet. And same thing, they just don't have the bacterial and fungal workforce to ferment the fibre out of the pasture. And so they lost weight because they essentially went on a diet because they couldn't digest the feed that they were being fed. But that all turns around too. And this is, we talk a lot about this in the Racing Queensland Off the Track nutrition series, if anyone's interested in going and finding that. If you look up the Queensland Off the Track website and go to the Nutrition Hub, you'll find a bunch of videos there about feeding off the tracks. But a lot of what I focus on there is exactly this, is just transitioning their gut over to being able to ferment fibres again after being on such a high grain diet. And if you get an off the track and you try to, and all you're focused on is having them maintain weight, and you keep feeding them a really high grain diet, you don't let their hindgut actually re-establish back to having a healthy population of fibre fermenters again. And then you're on this long journey of having a very expensive horse to feed because you have to keep pouring, bag grain-based feeds into it to get it to maintain weight.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Whereas I literally, the 3 horses, I'm like, oh, I just wish I could give you a grain diet so you'd lose some weight.
It was really, yeah, that's right. I know. I think I laugh about that sometimes too, thinking, is this a way? I think I say it in a podcast somewhere going, all those people with easy keepers, I know what you're thinking, but it's not the answer. You'll end up in a world of hurt with all these other health issues. But my last trip to Japan, we were going through the racing barns on one of the farms, and every barn has a barn manager, and they're responsible for the horses in that barn, and they're all very committed to having their horses, performing in the best way possible and also looking their best. And there was one particular stable, the barn manager was quite concerned about their coats, saying, they're longer than the other horses' coats, and they don't look as nice as the other horses' coats. And they're all on a very, very similar feed, and I couldn't figure it out for a little while. And I said, hang on a minute. I said, do you have the lights on here at night or in the morning? And he goes, no, we haven't turned our lights on yet. And I went, I said to the other barn managers, do you have your lights on there? Yes, we have our lights on. So they'd it was, what time of year? It was October. So they were coming out of their summer into their winter. But they'd artificially maintained the day length in the other barns, so that those horses hadn't started growing their winter woolies yet. Whereas the horses in this barn, where the lights were off, they had started to grow their winter coat. So there's a massive difference in it. I'd love to know how it actually affects them, when we transport horses all over the world or artificially change their day lengths. It's got to affect them somehow.
That's interesting. Because that was what was interesting with the Ciaron Maher, the guys that, you are bringing horses from overseas and everything is changing from the ingredients are probably fairly similar because they all feed extruded feeds in Ireland and England, pretty much. And lots of high fiber diet, but yeah, you've got, I don't know, a week of travel pretty much, and then quarantine. Yeah. And you don't know what's getting fed there. No offense, IRT, I'm sure you're lovely, but
I'd love to look at their diets.
Oh, well, I'll send this episode across to them and like, hey.
Yep.
Please. All right. And then I found that so fascinating that you're not allowed to feed a metrazole on race day. Never even thought about it once.
Yeah.
Didn't cross my mind.
Yeah. And it's quite frustrating for them because as Kat explained, especially for horses that are being treated for ulcers, and then they have to withdraw it on race day. And we know from a bunch of research and some of Dr. Ben Sykes's brilliant research that he's done, they've shown, it's really well known in humans that we hypersecrete acid when we come off omeprazole, which is why it's one of, if not the biggest selling drug in human medicine, but like it's up there. Because people go on it and then they can never come off it because their stomach keeps hypersecreting acid. Yeah. So they stay on it essentially for life. But yeah, race day, they have to take them off it. So you've got horses off feed, under stress, traveling and hypersecreting acid. Like it's just a recipe for disaster, really.
Especially because, I know they mentioned, you're feeding minimal hay. Yeah, it's just, and then you're listening to your episode about the welfare of equine. yeah, it was very fun, like good timing of episodes. Mind blowing.
I think, I mean, as an industry, thoroughbred trainers just need to put pressure on their racing bodies, I think, to change that, because it's not in the best interest of the horses.
No, we want to make sure that, thoroughbreds are taken such good care of, and yet we let them down massively by doing that.
And the other thing is too that trainers are also scared of having any kind of feed at the races because of all the things that they're not allowed to feed, that they're too scared to even have hay cubes or hay there. But straight after the race, ideally, because it's so hard to stop them from getting ulcers, because we can do everything by the book. I don't know which book, because a lot of this is written down in a book yet, but do everything that we know to prevent ulcers. So feeding loosened hay before they work them in the morning, make sure that they've got access to hay all the time are the two biggest things. And then making sure that their diets are balanced and they're getting zinc and all the amino acids and stuff they need to protect their stomach. But come race day, they are not, thankfully, particularly in that stable, it's not, omeprazole's not used as a preventative. So it's not so much of an issue from that perspective. But for the horses that are under active treatment, it's tricky because they're not allowed to give it to them.
I have a beautiful friend who's a trainer in Newcastle, Rebecca Dunn. And she feeds hay on race day, like when it's standing in the tie-ups.
Yeah.
And she gets picked on all the time. Yeah. She has a little Shetland pony as the friend.
Yep.
And her hay bag. And her horses do well.
And it would be amazing to see the incidence of severe ulceration in her stable versus other stables, because it's a huge part of it, even if it was just after the races. So that for the however many hours they have to travel home, they don't have really highly acidic fluid splashing around in their gut. Get them full of hay before they go on the track, and make sure that they have a drink of water, because at least the water will dilute out the acid a little bit.
Yeah. Because that's one thing I know it's quite common, is reducing their water intake. So it's all about how heavy the horse is going into the race. I remember you talking about this a bit.
Yeah, water sometimes, but I don't like when this is done, and I personally don't see how it helps. But it's more from a lung bleeding perspective.
Oh right,
because they use Lasix so much in the States for bleeders, but it's you're not allowed to use it here in Australia. So instead they reduce their water content, and I think done where it's just like we're just taking all the water away from you is a disaster and should never be done. I have worked out over the years very controlled ways of, particularly for known bleeders, very controlled ways of not, I guess, just giving them optimum amounts of water, but not so much, because you don't want them dehydrated. Their muscles don't work when they're dehydrated.
So what's the optimum amount?
I can't remember now. I'd have to go on. It was quite complicated. It was based on weight. It was based on their body weight. So depending on, so you had to weigh them, and it was based on their body weight as to how much water you would give them access to.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Another question that came up with that episode. Fueling a performance horse for stamina versus sprint. Is there a difference? And what is that?
Yes, there is a difference. So your sprinters, because they go into anaerobic metabolism, so energy generation with no oxygen really quickly, because they're pretty much out of the gate and flat stick from the get-go. We tend to feed them, or I tend to feed them a little bit more grain, so still well within the bounds of what is considered safe in the gut, but because so much of their energy generation during their race comes from glycogen, so which is just glucose stored in the muscles, I tend to want to give them a little bit more, I guess, glycogen manufacturing capacity by giving them a little bit more grain, and therefore more starch and more glucose directly in their diet, so that they can replenish their muscle glycogen supplies and make sure it's topped up really well. The long distance horses, so we've just watched the Melbourne Cup run, very long distance race for a thoroughbred. those horses, I mean, you see them, they're cruising along. It was really cool, actually. On Tuesday, there was a few races there where there was such a distinct change between them just cruising along and then actually really starting to go hard. You don't always see that in races, but there was just a couple that was like, wow, it was really distinct change there in pace. But when they're just cruising along, I mean, the thoroughbreds do that pace so easily. And they, in that phase of those races, there's still oxygen floating around. They're still able to suck oxygen into their lungs, and they're still able to distribute it out to their muscles fast enough. So they're still burning the volatile fatty acids from their hindgut, all the fatty acids from oils that we feed them. So those horses, I love to be able to get, if I can, get different types of fibre into their feed. So I love beet pulp in racehorse diets. It's reasonably expensive here. It's very easy to use in Japanese diets because I have a sugar beet industry, so it's there, and it's reasonably cheap. But if you can get some in, it's because it's just such a brilliant source of energy. It's so high in energy. So it's like grain from an energy perspective, but the energy is coming from the hindgut. And, this is where, like, fermenting lots of hay. So for your long distance horses, lots of hay in their diet. You can tend to feed them a little bit less grain, and then oils are brilliant for them. So bringing up the oil. So sprinters, we might do 1/4 to 1/2 cup of oil a day, whereas long distance horses might be 1/2 to 2 cups, just depending on the horse. Right. Yeah. So there is little differences, and then your standardbreds are a different thing again, because their metabolism and the kind of work they do is different again. So I can get them down. Thoroughbreds, I can't get them down really much lower than 2 to 3 kilos of grain a day. That would be minimum. Whereas the standardbreds are raced and won at Group 1 level on less than 1 kilo of grain-based feed.
Yeah, right. And I know you're going to try and wrap me up, but I just want to make sure that I have answered the one very important question.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you tiptoed around this. Because then we got on to we're going on to standardbreds, and my brain is just, you know what it's like. With grains you prefer, right? So just to make sure everyone knows, we're talking about extruded grains, boiled barley, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Corn/maize over barley.
It depends. So I will say oats is up there for me. I love oats in racing diets.
Or cooked.
They can be fed just whole. So oats are the one exception to cereal grains, must be cooked to feed to horses. So oats you can feed, and there's a few reasons for that. They're lower in starch. So, corn is 70% starch, whereas oats is like 30 to 40%. So they don't have as much starch. And then the starch is more digestible in the small intestine, particularly by the horse's enzymes. So that was something that we found in our research, is that the horse's enzymes are more effective at breaking down oat starch than bacterial and fungal enzymes, which is not what we expected, but really cool. It's like, oh, no wonder these two get along. Like, no wonder oats has been the grain to feed horses for so long. And then if the oat starch does get into the hindgut, it doesn't cause as much damage in there as corn does. So it doesn't go to lactic acid production quite so dramatically. It will still be unsafe if you fed a horse, 10 kilos of oats. You're still going to get heaps of hindgut starch fermentation, and it will be unsafe. But in the safe quantities that we would feed, 1 to 2, 3 kilos a day, depending on what the diet looks like, it just doesn't do the damage in the gut that corn does. So the last, that must have been episode 24 of the podcast.
Your memory.
I talk about ingredient variety, and bringing in lots of different grains. And this is something that when I very first started working with Peter Pride at Pride's Easy Feed, which is where Orla and I know each other from, he would say, 3 cereal grains, 3 sources of protein in the feed, looking for that ingredient variety, so that, and there's a few reasons for it, like from a manufacturing perspective and from a, grain supply perspective and all that sort of thing. But from the horse's perspective, corn has nutrients in it that barley doesn't. Barley has nutrients in it that corn doesn't. So my preference is actually that we use a combination of all of them. Corn is pretty hard on guts. is my observation. And I like having some of it in there for sure. And it was funny when I first started doing formulations in Japan. So in Australia, as you know, Orla, our barley is very cheap and corn is really expensive. Where in Japan, because they bring it in by the shipload, and I did say shipload, just to clarify, it's really, really cheap in corn. So I started formulating racing feeds for them with just a little bit of corn, like 5 to 10% corn. And they were saying to me, why would you use this very cheap grain in our premium feeds? And I said, oh, isn't that funny? Like for us, it's the very expensive grain and it's seen as the premium grain. So I do like to use some of it, but I don't like to use too much of it. And it has to be really well cooked. Has to be really well cooked because it's so resistant to digestion in the small intestine, but it ferments like crazy in the hindgut.
And where does barley fit in? Because I remember like even in the thoroughbred, not even thoroughbreds, just in prepping, it was always like the barley boiler. Very Australian thing, very strange. Smelled delicious, very strange.
It does. And I sometimes wonder whether the smell of boiled barley and corn is the reason why I'm a horse nutritionist, because when I was 16 in high school, I went and did work experience on one of the stud farms down in the Hunter. And part of their ration was like they'd put, and I wish I could remember the whole diet, but they'd put like a dry feed out in the feed bins, and then every horse would get a couple of cupfuls of this boiled mash, essentially. There was barley and corn, and man, it smelled so good. I don't know whether it was because I was always half starving because we were doing so much physical work, but yeah, it does smell amazing. But barley, barley's a nice grain. I mean, it's got nice fibers in it. It's reasonably easy to cook and make more digestible. So going through something like extrusion or a good steam flanking process, then it does become very digestible. It's got lots of beta glucan and interesting nutrients in it like that. So it's an interesting grain, but it's still a cereal grain. The predominant reason why we feed it is starch for the energy, and we need to make sure that starch is digestible. So yeah, boiling it is, people realised, a lot of show horse people used to do this. They realised a long time ago that if you boiled the barley, the horses put on weight really well, and that's for two reasons. One, they were digesting the barley, and two, they were able to digest their fibres in their hindgut.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think that will make her happy.
Well, that was a very racing oriented, but good.
Yeah,
it was good,
sorry,
good to go.
Not racing.
No, it's good. It's good to go back over all that stuff. And I really do hope that we will start to see change here in our racing industry in terms of the way horses are fed. Because if nothing else, the horses just stay healthy and in training for longer, which is brilliant for the horses' owners because they get to see the horse race more each preparation, and hopefully they're retiring it either because it's slow or because it's done enough, and not because its gut's been destroyed by the way that it has been fed.
Matt has a couple of horses, and one of the trainers in particular didn't believe me. And every time this horse just disappears at the end, I'm like, if only it fed some hay. If only.
Yeah.
So I hope he listens to this.
Yeah. You'll have to pass
You'll
it
know
on.
I'm talking about him.
Oh, you'll have to pass it on. It's a hard, and change can be scary, but honestly, just embrace it and do it, and you won't look back. Cool.
No,
well,
love it. Very good.
Thank you very much, Orla, and we will catch you next time.
Absolutely. Bye.
If you'd like to know more about the My Happy Horse virtual equine nutritionist, you can head on over to myhappy.horse. And also while you're there, check out the Dr. Nerida AI, which is me in AI format. And that version of me is happy to answer your questions about horse nutrition 24/7. Thanks again, and we'll catch you soon.